That was the night I called my brother. And that was the night I stopped pretending everything was fine. I want to start there, at that moment. Standing in the parking lot of the Fairmont in downtown Vancouver, my heels in one hand, my phone in the other, the rain just starting to come down in that soft Pacific way that doesn't feel serious until you realize you're completely soaked. I want to start there because everything that came before it. The 3 years with Wade. The Sunday dinners I smiled through. The way his mother Elaine looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet she kept forgetting to clean. All of it led to that parking lot. All of it led to me calling my brother and saying 6 words I'd never said to anyone in my adult life. I need you to come here. I'm 33 now. I was 32 when this happened. I'm a project coordinator for a mid-size construction firm in Burnaby. Nothing glamorous, but I'm good at it. I work hard, and I own my condo in New Westminster outright because I've been careful with money since I was 19 years old and learned the hard way that no one else was going to be careful with it for me. My name is Nora. My brother's name is Scott. And Wade's mother's name is Elaine Hargrove, and I want you to remember that name because she matters to this story in a way that I didn't fully understand until it was over. I met Wade at a friend's cottage up near Whistler. He was funny, easy to be around, the kind of person who fills up a room without trying. He worked in commercial real estate and did well at it. He was 36 when we got together, never married, no kids. His mother was a widow. His father had passed when Wade was in his mid-20s, and she lived in West Vancouver in a house that had been in the Hargrove family for 40 years. The kind of house where everything is beige and nothing is touched and you feel like you should take your shoes off in the foyer even if no one asks. I noticed things early on. Small things. The way Wade's whole posture changed when Elaine called. He'd straighten up, answer on the first ring, move to a different room. The way she referred to his previous girlfriend, a woman named Courtney who I'd never met, as that situation. The way she looked at my hands when I reached across the table at their first family dinner, looked at my hands like she was checking to see if they were clean. But I told myself these were just quirks. Everybody has a difficult family member, and Wade was so good in so many other ways. He was present, he was thoughtful, he remembered things I mentioned once in passing, so I pushed the small things down, and I focused on what was in front of me, which was a person I genuinely loved. By the time Wade proposed, we'd been together 2.5 years. He did it at Lighthouse Park on a Sunday evening in October, which is exactly the kind of thing he would do. Not a restaurant, not a crowd, just the 2 of us and the ocean and the last of the autumn light. The ring was simple and beautiful. A thin gold band with a small oval stone, and I said yes before he even finished the sentence. That night, after we called our families, Elaine's reaction was the one that lodged somewhere in the back of my throat. She said congratulations. She did say it, but there was a pause before it that lasted just long enough to be strange. And when I got off the phone and Wade asked what she'd said, I said she sounded happy, because I wanted that to be true. The engagement party was Elaine's idea. She insisted on hosting it. Insisted is actually the right word, because Wade told me later that she had brought it up before he'd even told her a venue, before we'd talked about anything. She had a venue in mind. She had a guest list in mind. She wanted to do it at the Fairmont because she'd hosted events there before, and she knew the event coordinator. I should have said something then. I should have said, Wade, this is our party, and I'd like to be involved in planning it. But I didn't, because I was still in that mode where I was trying to prove to Elaine that I was low maintenance, that I wasn't difficult, that I was the kind of woman who appreciated things. It's embarrassing to admit now, but I spent 2.5 years auditioning for a role I never got. My family was invited, technically. My parents drove up from Abbotsford. My brother Scott flew in from Calgary, which was a big deal because he doesn't travel lightly. He has 2 kids under 5 and a restaurant he co-owns that takes up most of his life. The fact that he came meant everything to me. My parents arrived first and texted me from the lobby. Scott texted me right after. "I'm here. I'm wearing the good jacket." "Where are you?" I was in a side room off the main event space, doing a last check in the mirror and trying to remember how to breathe, when Elaine found me. She didn't knock. She just opened the door and came in, already talking. She was wearing a dark green dress and her hair was set the way she always set it for events, and she looked at me in the mirror before she looked at me in person. "The neckline," she said. I looked down at my dress. It was a blush-colored wrap dress, tasteful, nothing extreme. I'd bought it specifically for this event. "What about it?" "It's a little much for this room," she said. "I have a shawl you can borrow." I said, very carefully, that I was fine. She tilted her head. "Nora, the Hendersons are coming tonight, and the Marchettis. These are people who've known our family for 30 years. First impressions." I turned to face her. "Elaine, this is my engagement party. This is my dress." She smiled. It was the specific smile she used when she was about to say something that she'd already decided she was going to say. "Of course it is. I just thought I'd mention it." She left. I stood in that room for another minute, just breathing. Then I put my shoulders back and went out to meet my fiancé at our engagement party. The first hour was fine. Wade and I moved through the room together, talking to people, and I felt myself relax into it the way you do when the actual event replaces the anticipation. My mom hugged me so hard, she nearly knocked the appetizer out of my hand. My dad shook Wade's hand for about 30 seconds longer than necessary, which is his version of emotional expression. Scott found me near the bar and said, "You look great. Elaine looks like she's doing tax season in her head." I laughed. I shouldn't have, but I did. The trouble started near the end of the first hour. I was standing with my cousin Britt and 2 of Wade's work friends when I heard Elaine's voice carry across the room. She was talking to the Hendersons, a couple in their late 60s who clearly adored her, and I caught the end of what she was saying. Of course, Wade has always had such a big heart. Too much sometimes. I don't know why that particular sentence reached me the way it did. Maybe because of the Hendersons' expressions. That polite, slightly uncertain look that people get when they're not sure if they should agree or change the subject. Maybe because I knew exactly what she meant by it. I was the example of his too big heart. I was the proof that he loved without discernment. I excused myself from the conversation and went to find Wade. I found him by the window with his uncle and told him quietly that I was going to step out for some air and would be back in 5 minutes. He touched my arm. He didn't notice anything was wrong. That's important. He didn't notice. I was coming back in from the terrace when it happened. I'd just stepped through the door to the main room, and Elaine was there, right there, like she'd been waiting. Maybe she had been. There was a woman with her. A friend of hers, I think. Someone I'd been introduced to earlier whose name I hadn't retained, and Elaine was mid-sentence when she saw me. She stopped talking. She looked at me. And then she said, loudly enough that I wasn't the only one who heard it, "There she is. The woman who convinced my son that a condo in New Westminster is a real estate investment." There was a silence. Not a total silence. The room was still going, music still playing, but in the small radius around us, people heard. I saw 2 heads turn. I said, "Elaine." She said, still smiling, "I'm just saying. Wade grew up in West Vancouver. He has a certain standard. I hope you understand that." "I understand that this is my engagement party," I said, "and I'd appreciate it if we didn't do this here." I don't know exactly what she intended to do next. Maybe she meant to say something else. Maybe she meant to walk away and let it sit. But what she did was reach out and I'm still not sure I have the right word for it. She grabbed my arm near the elbow, and the movement that followed was so quick and so unexpected that for a moment I didn't process what had happened. She slapped me across the face, open hand, hard enough that I felt it in my teeth. The room went quiet, real quiet, the kind that falls when something happens that everyone sees and no one knows how to categorize. I heard my mother make a sound from somewhere to my left. I heard someone near the bar say, very quietly, "Oh my God." I didn't move. I was so shocked, genuinely, completely shocked, that I just stood there with my hand coming up to my face on reflex, not even touching my cheek, just rising toward it. And then Elaine said, in a voice that had gone completely flat, "You do not speak to me like that in my event." She turned and walked toward the back of the room. I found out later that at least 4 people had their phones out. I found out later that Scott had seen the whole thing from 20 feet away. I found out later that Wade's uncle Barry had grabbed Wade's arm to stop him from saying something he couldn't take back. What I know from my own experience is this: I stood there for about 10 seconds. And then I did the only thing I could think of. I walked calmly to the side of the room, picked up my clutch from the chair where I'd left it, and walked out the front entrance of the hotel. I called Scott from the parking lot. He answered on the first ring, like he always does. "I'm already at the elevator," he said. "Stay where you are." That's my brother. That's Scott. He's 38, he's 6'2", and he is, I have always said this, the calmest person I have ever known when things go badly. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't make speeches. He just starts moving, and when he's moving toward a problem, the problem usually gets solved. He came outside and stood with me in the parking lot for a few minutes. He didn't ask me to explain. He'd seen what happened. He already knew. "What do you want to do?" he said. I said, "I want to press charges." He nodded, like that was a reasonable thing to order at a drive-thru. "Okay. I'm going to call someone, and you should go back inside and tell Wade what you've decided." I said, "What if he argues with me?" Scott looked at me. "Then you'll know something important." I went back inside. Wade met me just inside the doors. He'd been looking for me, his face somewhere between distressed and confused. He took my arm and steered us into the side corridor and said, "Nora, I'm so sorry. She shouldn't have." She was out of line. "I'm going to file a police report," I said. The look on his face did something complicated then. It moved through several expressions quickly, like cards being flipped. And then it landed somewhere I didn't expect. "Can we just," he started. "Can we talk about this first? She's my mother. If you file a report, it becomes a whole." "She hit me, Wade," I said, "at our engagement party, in front of 60 people. I know," he said. "I know, and I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to make sure she apologizes properly. But filing charges is going to protect me," I said. "Is that the end of that sentence?" He didn't answer. I stood there and I looked at him, really looked at him, and I thought about all the Sunday dinners, all the phone calls he took in other rooms, all the times I'd said something small about Elaine's behavior, and he'd said, "She means well," or "She's just protective," or "You have to understand where she comes from." I thought about all the times I'd made myself smaller to fit into a room his mother had already measured. And I thought about something Scott had said to me months ago after a particularly uncomfortable holiday dinner. He'd said, "The question isn't whether she likes you, nor. The question is whether he'll ever choose you." I'd told him he was being dramatic. I went back outside and stood with Scott while he made his call. He has a friend who's a criminal defense lawyer in the city. They went to UBC together, and Scott had already texted him on the way down in the elevator. His friend called back within 20 minutes and walked me through what a common assault charge would look like in BC, what I'd need, what the process was. He was calm and clear and didn't make me feel like I was overreacting. I wasn't overreacting. I knew that. But it helped to hear. My parents came out while I was on the phone. My mom sat beside me on the concrete planter at the edge of the parking lot and held my hand without saying anything. My dad stood a few feet away looking at the hotel entrance with an expression I'd never seen on his face before and hoped to never cause in anyone. When I got off the phone, he said, "Do you want me to go back in there?" I said, "No, Dad, thank you, but no." He nodded. He kept nodding for a moment longer than the situation required. Then he said, "All right." It was while we were standing there that Scott's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then looked at me. "This is interesting," he said. He handed me his phone. It was a text from a number I didn't know. The message said, "Scott, this is Elaine. I need to speak with your sister. I hope we can resolve this privately. Wade has told me about Nora's plans, and I think there's been a misunderstanding. Please ask her not to do anything hasty." I looked at that text for a long time. She had gotten Scott's number from somewhere, probably from Wade's phone, and she'd reached out to my brother, not to me, not to my parents, but to Scott, because she'd seen him walk out, because she'd assessed the situation and decided he was the one to neutralize. That, more than the slap, told me everything I needed to know about who Elaine Hargrove was. The slap could be rage, the slap could be a loss of control, but this was calculation. Scott took his phone back. He typed a response. He showed it to me before he sent it. "Elaine, Nora's decisions are her own. I won't be passing messages. If you'd like to speak with her, she's outside." She didn't come outside. What she did instead. And I found this out the next day when Wade called me, was go back into the event and tell people that I had provoked her, that I had said something to her on the terrace, privately, that had upset her, and that she had reacted poorly, but that it was not as simple as it appeared. Several people, apparently, were willing to believe this. Several people were not. The videos, which multiple guests had taken without anyone asking them to, were fairly clear. Wade called me the following morning. He'd spent the night at his mother's place in West Vancouver, which was a choice I noted. He said he was sorry. He said he'd been up all night. He said he wanted to fix this. I asked him what fixing it meant to him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think if my mother apologized, a real apology, in person, and if you were willing to not pursue the legal route." "Wade," I said, "I think we could move forward from this. Wade," I said again, more gently, "who did you sleep next to last night?" Another silence. "That's not fair," he said. "I think it's a pretty fair question," I said. I didn't file the assault report in the end. I decided, with my lawyer friend's advice in mind, that the videos existed, the witnesses existed, and that a formal charge would cost me significantly more in time and emotional energy than I had available. I made that choice with full information and without pressure. I want to be clear about that. What I did do was end the engagement. I told Wade in person, 2 days after the party, at my condo in New Westminster, the condo he'd never loved, in the neighborhood he'd never fully embraced, in the life that had never quite fit his mother's picture of who he should be with. I told him I loved him. I meant it. I still think I meant it, even now. But I told him that I had understood something at the party that I hadn't understood before, and that the thing I'd understood was this. He would always choose his mother, not maliciously, not consciously, maybe not even knowingly, but he would always choose her, and I couldn't build a life beside someone who was already spoken for. He cried. I cried too, a little in that particular way where you're sad and certain at the same time. I gave the ring back that afternoon. I kept it for exactly 2 days, which is the appropriate amount of time to feel the weight of something beautiful before you return it to a life it belongs to more than it belongs to yours. Elaine, for her part, did reach out to me. About a week after everything, I received a voicemail from her. She said she was sorry for what had happened at the party. She said she had reacted with more emotion than was appropriate. She said she hoped that I would take care of myself. It was about 45 seconds long, and it was the kind of apology that is really a record of the person's perspective more than an acknowledgement of yours. I listened to it twice. I did not call back. Scott flew back to Calgary 3 days after the party. Before he left, we sat in my kitchen and he ate the leftover butter chicken I'd ordered the night before. Eating my leftovers is his love language, I've decided. And he said, "For what it's worth, I'm glad it happened the way it happened." I said, "You're glad she hit me?" "I'm glad you know," he said. "I'm glad you know now when you can still do something about it instead of 10 years from now when you can't." I thought about that for a long time after he left. I'm still thinking about it, honestly, because there's a version of my life where I downplayed the party, where I let Wade manage the situation, where I accepted the 45-second voicemail as resolution and moved into that West Vancouver life with its beige rooms and careful furniture and Sunday dinners, where I smiled and made myself small and waited for Elaine to decide I was finally enough. I'm glad that version didn't happen. My condo is exactly the same as it was before any of this. I still drive down to Abbotsford to see my parents once a month. Scott still texts me photos of his kids doing chaotic small-person things at unreasonable hours. I went back to work 2 weeks after the party and my team didn't ask questions, which I appreciated. The rain in Vancouver keeps doing that soft, unhurried thing it does, and I keep getting soaked whenever I forget my umbrella, which is more often than I'd like. I'm okay. That's not a performance. I'm genuinely, quietly okay. The last time I talked to my dad about it, really talked about it, not just checked in, he said something I didn't expect. He's not a man of many words, my dad. He's an Abbotsford guy, retired now, spends most of his time in his garage working on things that don't need to be fixed. He said, "You know what bothered me most about that night?" I said, "What?" He said, "That she thought she could." I didn't say anything for a second. "She looked at you," he said, "and she thought she could. And that tells you everything." He went back to his garage. I sat in my mom's kitchen for a while after that, drinking tea I didn't particularly want, thinking about what it means to be the kind of person someone looks at and thinks they can, and thinking about the work of becoming the kind of person no one looks at that way twice. I'm working on it, that's all I can tell you. I'm working on it.